So I'm Christy, and Francis and Nadia are here. They'll be helping me today. Do you guys want to introduce yourself?
Okay, so I'm Francis. I live in California. I'm going to go to New Wave next year, and I'm going to be going into the 6th grade next year.
I'm Nadia. I live in California. I'm going into Fletcher next year, and I'm going into 6th grade.
Yeah. So today we have Jordan and Tiffany, who are both doing bioengineering research at MIT. Jordan is from New Jersey and is pursuing her PhD, while Tiffany is originally from California and then who moved to Texas and is completing her postdoc research. They both know that the greatest innovations rely on knowledge and skills from multiple fields. Therefore, they combine their interest in biology and engineering with technology and medicine. Some of the cool projects that they have been working on have been helping athletes recover from injuries and doing regenerative tissue restoration. For those of you who might not know what some of those complicated medical terms mean, I will let each of our speakers share more. Can you guys tell us a little bit more about what you are each doing now? We know that you work and do research in a lab at MIT. But what kind of research do you do? And if you have photos or videos to help explain, that would be great.
Jordan, do you want to go or should I go?
I can go. So
okay.
I mentioned earlier, I did like sports medicine-y work when I was originally going to undergrad because I thought that I was going to be interested in like tissue engineering, like finding ways of designing bone implants for people or cartilage implants for people who had like arthritis or who like tore something during sports. And then sometime when I was in undergrad, I kind of figured out that like working with cells wasn't really something I was super into, which kind of killed that for me. And now I work more with like using brain stimulation to try to knock people out without drugs. And that's been pretty fun and pretty interesting. I don't have a ton of pictures because like electric fields don't get less confusing in picture form in my experience. I like struggled in physics in undergrad and high school. And I think that it's only been through like a lot of reading that I'm now getting it. But I do have pictures of actually my undergrad work. I can figure out how to share this. So one of the things we were interested in was designing a better meniscus. So your meniscus is in your knee, and it's like one of the main things that like when you walk and you're like hitting the ground and there's like force, it's one of the main things that like absorbs that force so that your bones don't like break. And we were interested in finding new ways to design menisci for when people tore them, which is like pretty common in sports. And so one of the things that I was interested in is how do you attach that to a bone because they're such different materials. And so I was looking at, I was removing parts of bone and kind of creating gradients in different types of bone with different like time points to figure out how much you could remove and still have a meniscus that could like withstand you walking around or doing sports. So this is kind of an example of that. So this is like a normal piece of bone. And then this is as you like remove more mineral from it. And the idea was that, you know, there's some in between of like none, which was the problem that we had with the original tissue engineered menisci that we made, and like full on bone, which just didn't work in our experience. And finding that like middle ground was kind of my job. And then we also, there's a, not that. There we go. We also published a paper on this, which like with much nicer figures that kind of shows you like we basically figured out that somewhere between here and here, 4.5 and 5 hours was like our sweet spot for figuring out like how much mineral you wanted in a bone. And you actually still had in the red is like not bone, it's cartilage in this case. And you still wanted that there. So like we were trying to figure out how to balance like not being all red, but also not being all white. So that's what I did as an undergrad. Do I turn this off? Cool. Okay.
Well, I think you gave a nice little kind of, I think where we worked on very similar type things, because my PhD was also in bone tissue engineering. So I have like a really short animation on just what tissue engineering is, because those words may not mean anything to you. So let me see if I can share this. Is it working for you?
Oh, there we go. Yep.
You see this video?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, like I said, I work in the field of tissue engineering and regenerative medicine. And what that just means is that your human body is made up of a whole bunch of different tissues. And they work together to keep us alive. And so that could be brain tissue, bone tissue, like Jordan was saying, and liver tissue. And sometimes those tissues break down. And so what happens is the medicines that we have are not enough to fix them. And so tissue engineering is a way for us to essentially engineer those organs from scratch. So what I work on is the liver. And so if you actually look at the liver here and zoom in really close, we have to first figure out, in order to make this liver, what is the liver made of? So when you look, you see that there's billions of cells within the liver, and they're arranged in this really pretty way. It almost looks like a little honeycomb, little hexagons all throughout the liver. And in the middle, that hole that you see is the blood vessel. And then on the edges are other cell types and other network structures. And so if we really want to make a successful liver, there are some aspects of this that are important for that liver tissue to survive. And so what you can do is then use something called biomaterials. And so biomaterials are any sort of material that can be employed for a healthcare or medicine application. And what these materials do is provide overall structure to the tissue that you're making, and then also allow you to control how different cells talk to each other and guide them into forming the tissue that you want. And so this can be done through 3D printing, which I'm sure you've heard of, and then also hydrogels, which are soft like gel materials, which mimic many of the aspects of your body tissues. And so when you combine those together, what you get then is a mini tissue in the lab. So if I close this and then show you what these liver tissues look like. So these are mini liver tissues that we've created in the lab, and they're in a spheroid form, so they look like little spheres. And they're made of the liver cells, which is the hepatocyte, combined with a stromal cell, which is more of like a supportive cell. And so what we found in the lab is that liver cells, even though they're super happy in the human body and they can regrow many, many times, even when injured, when you take them out and put them in the lab, they don't grow at all. And they need to have a friend, like a friend cell, like a best buddy that they need to hang out with. And when they have that other cell type, they're really happy and they can grow. And so what happens when you put those two cells together and they form these little spheres. And so what you're seeing is the liver cells are in green, and then their little nuclei are in blue. And so this is just like a little gel with little mini livers inside. And we use them to regenerate liver tissue. And we also use them as a way of understanding the biology of different diseases that happen in the liver.
So, how did you get introduced to this area?
I guess for me, I was lucky to be in a biomaterials lab that was looking at like tissue engineering products as a high school student. And so it just made sense for me to keep kind of going along that line. I was also interested in cartilage. So in your back, between the bones that make up your spine, there are these discs, and they're kind of softer and they're made up of a type of cartilage. And it's common, especially in older people, for you to like damage them. And I actually did that when I was younger. And so I was interested in like finding ways to engineer new discs, partially self-serving because I wanted my back to be okay, but also just because it seemed like a really interesting problem. And so that kept me kind of in the tissue engineering realm for a while. But I started taking more like electrical engineering, like circuits and physics and coding classes in college, and I started getting more into that. And I did a summer research project that used machine learning, which I'm sure you guys have heard about. And that kind of got me into like, how can we use machine learning for medicine, as well as like circuits and physics. And there aren't a ton of things, I guess, in the projects that I saw when I was looking at places to work for grad school that have all of those things and also don't involve the brain. So that kind of led me to doing work in the brain. And, you know, we don't know that much about the brain. And so it seemed like kind of an interesting place to be because like there's so much you can learn.
Well, so for me, like I said, I really enjoyed biology during high school. And I always wanted to work with the human body when I applied for college, but I wasn't really sure I wanted to be a doctor. And so actually during the time when I started applying, there was a really new major that came out, which was biomedical engineering. It's going to make me sound very old, but the field was really new at the time, and the major itself at UT Austin was only about 4 years old. And it sounded really cool because it had this aspect of sort of problem solving and critical analysis that I was really looking for. I wanted to make the things that doctors use in people. And I thought that might be a good fit. And I really loved it when I started. And so I wanted to continue that when I went to graduate school, and I did material science there. So I actually made biomaterials for bone regeneration. And then for my postdoc, I saw that one big issue in the tissue engineering field was that we were using materials and hoping to guide cells, but we didn't really understand how the cells were working with the materials. And so because we weren't understanding the cells, we actually couldn't make the tissues we wanted. And so I decided to focus on a different aspect, which is the cells, and work in a tissue that is made mostly of cells, which is the liver. And so that's where I am right now.
Could you guys explain what biomedical engineering is in simple terms?
Yeah, I would just say that biomedical engineering or bioengineering is just using engineering concepts and skills and techniques to solve problems for the human body. Would you agree with that, Jordan?
Yeah, I tend to agree with that. It's such a broad field and you can do so many different things in it. So it's really just like taking fundamental engineering skills and applying them to biological or medical problems.
Yeah. So I would, maybe a better way to sort of explain it is like when you take a college class in biomedical engineering, they make you think of your blood vessels as pipes, like tubes, finding an analogy for parts of your human body and in some place else that other engineering disciplines have been working on. Like your bone, you know, you walk on it, you apply force, and that's a mechanical issue. And your brain, you know, you have neurons, and that's also an electrical issue. And so you can apply different aspects of those engineering principles that have been around for much longer to the human body.
Now we're gonna do like a speed round, and we're basically gonna ask you short questions, and you should be able to answer them in like 2 seconds or so. So yeah, and other kids, if they want to, they can just say random things too.
Okay, I'm ready.
Go ahead.
So our first one is, what is your dream vacation spot?
London.
Japan, Tokyo.
Favorite thing about science?
getting to play with a lot of fun toys.
Yeah, freedom to do a lot of things.
If you could solve any world problem, what would it be?
Ooh.
Oh, okay. I think
Climate
healthcare
change?
access.
Would you pick robots or Minecraft?
Robots.
Robots.
Favorite hobby?
Cooking.
Podcasts. Are podcasts a hobby? I don't know.
Oh yeah, fun fact, Jordan has a YouTube video or channel for those of you guys who don't know and want to check it out.
I'm never really sure whether that counts as a hobby, which is why I didn't say it.
Okay, so flowers or cacti?
Flowers, I
Cacti.
guess.
Cool. Do any of the students have any questions for our two speakers? Do you like donuts? From Shreya.
I absolutely love donuts.
I do too. They're delicious.
They're so good.
Why did you pick MIT for school?
Good question. When I was looking at grad school in particular, I looked at places that had people that I wanted to work with. And so MIT specifically wasn't necessarily, I didn't pick MIT because of MIT. I picked MIT because of the people who work here. And I think that there are a lot of fields where, you know, MIT might not be the best place to be because the people that you want to work with aren't there. So I picked MIT because I have two advisors for my PhD. My two advisors work here, and I was really interested in their work. Also, location, I wanted to be in kind of a more city-esque region. My undergrad, Cornell, is in upstate New York, in the middle of nowhere. So I wanted to be in a more urban area. And then obviously MIT has a lot of resources, and the name is certainly helpful. But yeah, for me, it was really there were people who worked here that I want to work with. And so I applied, and they accepted me, and now I'm
For me, it's a little bit of a different story, but similar reasons in that sense. So I'm not in school technically. I'm considered an employee. I got my PhD and I wanted to do more research, and I wanted to work for someone that was doing great things. And so that's why I came here. But Boston has the benefit of being like a really big biotech hub. There are lots of great biotech companies around here. And for me, someone who's interested in doing tissue engineering and trying to translate that to people, having that perspective in the area is just really important because you can really frame your experiments and the projects that you have in a way where you can try to make the most impact in a short amount of time. And it's really hard to get that anywhere else where people aren't trying to commercialize or, you know, turn this research into actual things for people.
Yeah, the fact that it's both a biotech hub and also just like a hospital hub was definitely an appeal for me. Like some of the best hospitals in the country are here. The biggest biotech scene in the country is here. You know, whatever you want to do in the realm of biomedical engineering, there's probably someone here who's like basically an expert in it.
Right. And again, it really comes down to, again, having multiple experts in different fields coming together to really solving a problem. You know, a doctor who actually sees patients and knows like, well, this is the thing that we actually need to have help. Someone who actually can figure out what the thing may be, and someone in the commercial or industry realm that can say, well, how do we actually make this happen? How do we actually push this out? And so you need sort of a little bit of everything. And
This one's from Shreya. What do you have to do for the application for MIT?
I mean, for grad school, so for a PhD, you write a personal statement, which is usually about a 3-page essay of sorts, where you talk about yourself and why you want to do science and why you want to go to that particular program. You talk about like what kind of research you've done in the past and why you did that research and kind of what you got out of it. And then you talk about like who you want to work with at that program and why you think that program's good for you, and how like your background has kind of prepared you for that program. You also have to have letters of recommendation. So those are usually from people you've worked with as an undergrad. Mine were from my undergrad advisor, my research advisor, so the professor I worked with on the bone stuff. I worked with him for 3.5 years. And so he wrote one. I interned in biotech for a summer, and so my manager from that wrote me one. The summer that I did research in machine learning, that professor wrote me one. And then another professor that I taught for and did a lot of like science policy and science communication work with wrote me one. After that, like you have to send them a copy of your grades. I think that's mostly it, actually. Yeah, there's like, or you have to take a test. It's called the GRE. A lot of programs are starting to get rid of it. It's a standardized test, kind of like if you guys have like state tests that you have to take in like middle and high school. I did growing up. And yeah, you have to take it. There's like a math part and a Englishy part, and you're supposed to do well in it. But
Yeah.
yeah.
For undergrad too, whether you want to apply to MIT for undergrad or somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I think they also have a special portfolio aspect where you can submit like some of your coding projects or engineering projects or whatnot.
Yes, some programs do. And the application will vary a bit by program. So I actually applied to 2 different programs at MIT, and they had 2 different application requirements. One had a portfolio requirement where I had to submit like a website that like artfully showed my past work. And that's just because that's how that department works. And then for the department that I ended up doing my PhD in, they were more traditional, where it was essay, grades, letters. That was basically it.
Yeah. So we're almost out of time, but do you guys want to share one key takeaway that you would want the student to take with them?
I'd say be curious and fail a lot and be okay with that. Because science is really not about being a genius. It's really about asking the right questions and just trying to understand and solve that question or test that hypothesis. And a lot of times it doesn't work. And but people still keep moving, and that's because they're really passionate about what that answer may be. And so I would definitely say that it's more about effort in some cases and persistence rather than being like, oh, I'm not made for STEM. So I would just keep trying and be open to the experiences that you have and learn from them.
Yeah, jumping off of that, I'd say ask as many questions to as many people as you can, especially people from like different areas of science, different backgrounds, different levels. But also like if you're not interested in science and you like want to ask like someone who's really into history about something. I found that it was through asking questions that I found out about opportunities that might interest me. It was also how I found out about things that I had some perception of that turned out to not be like that. And that was maybe how I ruled something out. So just asking, like, if you have a question, I think you should ask it. And I think that kind of similarly, like, you should let that curiosity kind of drive you towards what you think you're interested in now, and also be comfortable with the fact that that might not be what you're interested in forever.
Yeah, that's really great advice. Yeah, so I think our time is up for today, but thank you, Tiffany and Jordan, for taking your time to talk to us and tell us all about what you've been doing.
Right. Thank
No
you.
problem.
This has been great.
Thank you.
Thank you.